Our group discussed disability issues and we were Group 6. The focus of our group was transportation and accessible environments for people with disabilities. The members in our group are Kelsey, Shanya, Michael, Anastasia, Lillian, and me. I am Angelica and I enjoyed participating in this group. This group influenced my perspective on transportation and accessibility. I think about accessibility and transportation differently now because I always used to take it for granted and realize that a lot of people cannot take this for granted. Through this discussion, I have learned a lot about movements to advocate for accessibility and inaccessibilities that people with disabilities regularly encounter. And I think that it is imperative that we make a difference soon. I enjoyed responding and receiving responses from group members because it helped me learn more about the discussion topics and also broadened my horizons in a way that I thought about certain matters. I enjoyed learning about what other people were interested in and how they connected their thoughts to no pity. I also enjoyed people's feedback and was to what I was saying because it helped better my understanding and discussion skills in the process.
Participating in this group has helped me to think more critically about the challenges faced every day by people with disabilities. I've had to think about all of the different aspects of life that a person's disability can affect. From public transportation, to what apartments or homes they can live in, to where they can sit in certain classrooms. Reading my partner's posts was very enlightening. I especially appreciated how Michael added a different perspective through his connection with his grandfather who uses a wheelchair. Responding and receiving responses was helpful, and I almost always agreed with what my classmates were saying. We all seemed to be on the same page in terms of our beliefs, usually insisting that we need better, more accessible environments for people with disabilities. One response I especially enjoyed was Kelsey's response to my post about accessibility in schools. She brought up how outraged she was when one of the SPED 117 guest speakers mentioned that she sometimes couldn't get to her office hours in Altgeld. I loved her response because I was equally upset by that fact. Why should I perform better on the next exam than my classmate who uses a wheelchair, based solely on the fact that I can walk up a flight of stairs and she cannot?
Another issue we have examined is the need for accessible buildings. History has not been too kind to people with disabilities. For too long, business owners have been able to practically legally discriminate against people with disabilities. Luckily, in 1990, ADA was passed, which protected the rights of Americans with disabilities and also mandated a number of improvements for buildings to make them more accessible. Even though it is currently unlawful to discriminate against people with disabilities, a lot of buildings still lack proper access, which effectively constitutes discrimination. This practice is not only absolutely immoral, it is also a poor economic decision. According to the United States Census Bureau, Americans with disabilities are the largest and the fastest growing minority group in the United States, which is a huge consumer market. And perhaps this discrimination practice stems from the belief that providing access would be too expensive for businesses. However, it is simply wrong. According to an article by Mace et al., incorporating accommodations for people with disabilities is usually not very costly, and simple alterations to the design can go a very long way to providing much more accessible environments and therefore increasing their customer base. There are a lot of simple but important details that need to be taken into account when building constructions, such as door widths, extra turning space, making protruding objects marked, and abiding by a couple of other rules. By simply incorporating those changes, buildings can become much more accessible for everyone and bring us one step closer to a fully inclusive society.
Coming into this group, I knew about disabilities in a way because of my grandfather. He was disabled. He got polio when he was 19 years old. And then the polio actually took away the use of his legs. But that didn't stop him from living a very long life. He recently passed at the age of 85. But in that time, he never complained about his disability. He always, you know, he was very strong. And from what I've learned from the reflections and responding from the group members, I've realized how this was kind of a known thing among my group is people who have disabilities just want to be treated like any other person, and that they don't see their disabilities as something that can hold them back. And I really enjoyed participating with my group and talking about these subjects. So thank you.
Transportation accessibility is not an issue to be taken lightly. Mobility is one of the things that can have a drastic effect on one's quality of life. According to a 2015 article published by NMEDIA, people with disabilities are much less likely to get preventative health care or get a job, primarily due to transportation difficulties. People with disabilities often need increased medical attention, but transportation can pose an issue and thus become a threat to their health. Even though the ADA has led to major improvements in the transportation system across the United States, there are still problems with compliance that produce to barriers for people with disabilities. We feel that this lack of accessibility in such an essential part of life, transportation, fails to reflect the rights of people with disabilities. We don't think it's fair that some people should have a more difficult time getting from one place to place simply due to having a disability. We understand that the move towards true accessibility of transportation will be gradual, but we think that until there is true equality in transportation accessibility, there is still work to be done.
The group discussion in SPED 117 has drastically influenced my perspective about disabilities and accessibility. I think that a class like SPED 117 should be taken by the vast majority of students because I've learned so much in this class through my group discussion. My group members and I had very insightful discussions where we bounced ideas off one another. I think that hearing that I was not the only one who didn't realize how accessibility was so scarce made me feel better because I realized that I wasn't the only one who didn't know about these things and that we can do more to help. Our group did an extremely good job working with one another and bringing different topics to the table. There was one discussion that stood out to me. It was the one where we all chose different areas of accessibility and talked about where it needs work, like college campuses, living areas, buildings, transportation, and more. I'm so happy I took this class because I know how to make a difference now, and I think that my group members and I will continue to talk beyond this class about what we can do to make sure that worldwide accessibility is more than just a thought and having it be more of a reality.